Blog Talk Radio.
Aziz, Aziz,
Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. I'm Crystal Good, and I'm with my co-host. I think my co-host is on here. Let's see. Hold on. Let me push a button over here. Hi, I'm Crystal Good, and I'm with my co-host. Are you there?
John Kemet Shabazz. Yes, I'm here, Crystal.
Oh, great. And I'm Black by God, and I'm happy to be with John Kemet Shabazz, L. And who are you with, John?
I'm with the SHABAZZ Report. We're on YouTube where we do Afrocentric grassroots media.
Fantastic. And we have a really special show tonight. We're going to be talking about and honoring former West Virginia Supreme Court Justice Richard Neely. And I first want to get started by saying, giving my condolences to his family and to his son. His son, Chase, was a boxing partner of mine, and we didn't figure that out until I was telling him that I had met his dad, or actually he saw me in his dad's office. And I'll get to that story a little bit later, but I just want to open up and kind of tell everybody that's listening a little bit about Richard Neely. So I'm going to read pretty much what Jeff Jenkins wrote up for West Virginia Metro News. And so Richard Neely is the outspoken former member of the West Virginia State Supreme Court, and he passed on Sunday. He was 79. He died of liver cancer at home, surrounded by his friends and family. He has a very interesting West Virginia pedigree, and Mr. Neely was the grandson of a former West Virginia governor and U.S. senator. He grew up in Marion County, graduated from Dartmouth and Yale, and he served as a captain in the U.S. Army during Vietnam. He was awarded a Bronze Star for his service, and he began practicing in your neck of the woods there, John, Fairmont, after Vietnam. He then ran and won a seat in the West Virginia legislature in 1970. He was elected as a Democrat to the Supreme Court in 1973, where he became the youngest judge on an appellate court at 31. He was Chief Justice at age 38. He then retired from the court at 1990 and 1995, and he decided to run again this year, which we'll talk about a little later, and he lost to Justice Tim Armstead. Many of his friends and family and colleagues remember him as loyal, truth speaker, intelligent, one of the smartest individuals to ever be in West Virginia, unafraid of sharing his views. And he was remembered this week by so many, including U.S. Senator Shelley Moore Capito, Senator Joe Manchin, former Charleston Mayor Danny Jones, just numerous colleagues and people whose lives he touched. West Virginia Governor Jim Justice also flew the flag at half-mast for his honor. Richard Neely was an author. We're going to talk a little bit about his books, too, an academic, a public speaker, and always, as we'll get to, a bit of an outrageous figure full of color. And tonight, you're going to hear from our perspective, from the Black community. And by community, I mean me and John and whoever else wants to call in tonight. And we don't claim to speak for the whole Black community, but we know that wherever two or more are gathered, we're in communion. And this is Black by God, a show that centers on Blackness in West Virginia.
Okay. Well, that sounds real good, Crystal. Crystal, I'd like to start out first by clarifying my statement on Justice Richard Neely. My statement upon hearing his death, I remember I sent you the article on that. I had a conversation with myself, and I said to myself, if it don't be for Justice Richard Neely, you might still be in prison doing life without mercy. And I repeated that self-talk statement that I said to myself to you. But I want to clarify that because now it is true that Justice Richard Neely was part of the per curiam court that reversed my wrongful conviction back in 1988. I had first come in contact with Justice Richard Neely, or talk of Justice Richard Neely, as a wrongfully convicted person working in the prison law library in Moundsville, working to get my wrongful conviction reversed. Neely was perceived among the jailhouse lawyers as someone that would protect the Constitution. And the Constitution was more important than any personal feelings about any convicted person. And upon reading much of his decisions, I had to read some of his past decisions because his past decisions in Persinger, Goff, and Parsons were the cases in which my case, when it came through in 1988, State versus Randall, 366 Southeastern 750, it set new precedent in police misconduct. He put the Fairmont Police Department in check, told them that their actions was egregious misconduct, and reversed at that time. Okay, and it was, for me, it was kind of revolutionary, and it gave me new life because I had been sentenced to life without mercy by Judge Fred Fox there in Marion County, who I believe was a friend of Neely's. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe they were friends. So Neely, in sticking to the Constitution, he goes against the Fairmont Police Department as well as his friend, Judge Fred Fox. You understand what I'm saying? At that particular time. And I got some more to say about Neely because while he reversed my case in 1988, he turned around the next following year and reversed my colleague's friend, Ronnie C. Williams, who, from Huntington, West Virginia. We were working in the law library together with one another. Ronnie C. Williams was a black man that was a bank robber. He had robbed, theoretically, or technically, he had robbed the bank in Huntington back in 1976. Neely reversed his conviction then on a suggestive photo array. Neely turns around again in 1989 and reverses the same man's conviction a second time and tells Ronnie Williams and the Huntington Police Department, we know he's in so many words to summarize. He says, we pretty much know he did it because there's evidence of guilt, but the Constitution calls us to a higher standing and reverses his conviction a second time. A third case, one more case, Glendale Woodall. Neely issues the ruling on that. It was a split decision, and later on, the Supreme Court looks at it more closely and orders a new, this is the Fred Zane case. Glendale Woodall's case was the first case that broke that, which our good friend Jimmy Gardner was to benefit years later from the work that, the decision that Neely put in terms of Glendale Woodall. So I mentioned all of this, and eventually I was released from Moundsville, and I got to get all this in. I go back into the community as a community organizer, and I get a job working for NOI Security Agency. Neely comes up again. This time he comes up as a writer and an author, writing in his book, Take Back Your Neighborhood. At that time, I was a security guard dealing with the Crips and Bloods in Newcastle, Pennsylvania, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I was getting trained, and Neely's book, for me at that time, it served as validation that we were doing good work because the work at that time I was a part of was controversial, and Neely's book was controversial, Take Back Your Neighborhood. It was a book where Neely told the community to take back your neighborhood and secure it from those people that are terrorizing the women and the children. I snatched that. I said, well, that's the kind of work I'm doing now. I'm underappreciated, but at least this West Virginia Supreme Court judge, eccentric and colorful, everything that Judge Neely was. I had never met the man personally, but I felt a connection to him because he was from Fairmont and he believed in protecting the United States Constitution, and he reversed my conviction. So while I say that, Neely, if it don't be for him, I might not have gotten my conviction reversed. I don't like to leave it at that because there were other important people. Justice Frank Cleckley, who I shared with you, I knew him personally. While I didn't know Neely personally, I knew Justice Frank Cleckley, and he deserves a show in and of himself because I remained close with Frank Cleckley. I got a chance to really know Justice Frank Cleckley after I got out of prison, and I would go visit him in the law library up at WVU. With that said, that's about as much as I can get out now about Justice Neely in terms of my contact with him, and it was never direct contact, but I have respect for him based upon the fact that he protected the Constitution, okay? And I've seen the various cases where he didn't have to reverse, but he did reverse. And so I pay tribute to Judge Neely. He's not John Brown, but since John Brown wasn't around any longer, we'll take Judge Neely.
We sure will. We sure will. And one of the things that you said, John, when you opened up your statement, and first of all, I don't think that we have to know a person personally to feel their impact, positive or negative. And I think when you said that he followed the Constitution and went against the police department and his colleagues, that says a lot. Because one of the things that keeps coming up, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a law scholar, I am a regular person that, tries to pay attention. But one of the things that keeps coming up when people talk about Richard Neely is his commitment to the Constitution. And for you to say, and for others to say, that he upheld that Constitution and would go against the police department, I think those are two things that are very, very juxtaposed. And then repeating, those cases where he upheld the Constitution, for black men in West Virginia to have their rights. It's a sad day. I mean, it's a sad day for, of course, the family and friends and the loved ones, but it's a sad day to lose that voice in today's narrative. One of the things too about his book, and I haven't read the book yet, but he was very outspoken, and some of the quotes that I read from him are, that he suggests attacking drug dealers with baseball bats. He believes sex offenders are the modern day equivalent of Salem witch trials. He said what he felt and thought, and he could have been painted, I believe. He's almost a bit of a, we would think perhaps he would be a very conservative judge, and I think, and a very conservative thinker. But he seemed to be very different in the way that he approached the law, and that was to follow it. So this is what I'd like to talk about. Like, why is it revolutionary to have a judge that's following the law?
Right. Well, it appears in Ronnie C. Williams' case, and I was going to read from it, but Neely went over a totality of circumstances where he weighed the facts of the case, and you said you're not a lawyer and so forth. Neither am I, but I am a researcher, litigator, and I had to study his work. I find his analysis leaning toward the Constitution. When it comes down to a totality of circumstances argument, you can find rationalizations to justify keeping somebody in prison if you want to keep them in prison, bottom line. Okay, anybody that studies law and researches the legal interpretations that justices make, you can find a reason to keep somebody away. And with anybody, it should have been. I mean, not to talk bad about my colleague Ron C. Williams, but Neely had reversed Ronnie C., not Ronnie T., but Neely had reversed Ron C. Williams' case twice on suggestive photograph array. That the Huntington police used a suggestive identity. You know, like when they do a lineup, and
right.
They did that twice. They did that twice in Ron Williams' case. But so he turned around and reversed a second time, which I find is amazing, as a way of saying, look, I'm going to stick with this. Yeah. I was around Ron C. Williams, and I remember we worked in the law library. He dropped down to the ground and thanked God. Really, and I got to get this in, the forces of nature, the forces of justice compelled Justice Neely and that per curiam court to do justice. You don't get justice without putting in work, okay? And you don't get justice unless you deserve it too, okay?
Well,
that's the way I look.
What is a per curiam court? I don't know what that is. What does that mean?
I had to go. That's a legal term, and I had to look that term up, okay? Because I didn't know what it meant either. It's a tricky legal term. It's a term, from what I understand, means as per the court, per individual, or as per collective. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So it could be one individual speaking for the court, or it could be one individual speaking for himself, speaking for the court. So you have to go look up the term per curiam and get your definition of it, but that's the definition I was able to get. Now, I'm not sure if it means I'm presupposing that it means a unanimous court. And if anybody is listening, you take the time to Google it and give us a clear definition on what per curiam means. Okay? In Ronnie C. Williams' two cases, Justice Neely's name is on there, but it's not necessarily a per curiam opinion. So, to some extent, the Western Supreme Court, I think, speaks in codes. And I don't have 100% proof on that, but in the legal language, to me, is coded. It means something, okay? Because I don't know what per curiam means, and that's been 25, 30 years ago.
But so we had to put work in. What does that mean for a sitting judge? What to put work in?
Well, you're asking me, and I'm going to tell you, for a sitting, Neely, in my research of him, he was Chief Justice for years, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I think while he was on the bench, he set the standard, okay?
Mm-hmm.
He set the standard for the other judges coming on. For instance, his court was filled with judges. Some of the people that were on his court were, I think, Brotherton. I think McGraw served with him for a period of time. So if you remember Justice Darrell McGraw, I think it was two of them. There was Darrell McGraw. They were brothers. Okay, they were perceived as being liberals and friendly to the black community as well. You remember that, Crystal?
Yes.
You remember the McGraw brothers? Okay, yeah. So I'm talking about this because we're getting a look at this court that I was able to get justice from. But not only me, other black men were able to get justice from as well. And Justice Neely spearheaded that court for several years. Actually, believe it or not, when I look at the difficulties that the West Virginia Supreme Court might have had, say, maybe 3 or 4 years ago when 5 justices were impeached. Do you remember that? Do you remember that?
Yes, of course.
I thought about it. Go ahead, Chris.
I mean,
go ahead, please.
For the highest court in the land, right, in our state, for the highest court, right, to be impeached, I think that it shows the literal corruption of West Virginia. And, when I met Justice Neely, it was because he was and he did run again for Supreme Court in 2020. And he was looking for someone to run his campaign. And I was introduced to him through a mutual friend, and I didn't know what I was walking into, but as soon as I walked into his office and it was fully decorated with not only, his achievements, in the traditional lawyer sense, but there was art. And, being an artist, I just, I look for the details in a person, and I could see that, he was a curious person, an interesting person. And and I was also interested in why this man, right? And I had to do my research on him real quick before, a couple of interviews. Why did he want to go back to the court? He's got plenty of money. He's running a practice. Why, at his age, does he want to go run a political campaign and jump into, a very rigorous, again, it's not like you're working for yourself. Of course, he had his own firm for many years, and that lends a bit of leisure, I do believe. You can pick and choose the days you want to come in the office. Why would he want to, literally at a retirement age, go back to the bench? And I think
what was his age? How old was he when he decided to run again?
That was this year. So he was 78 years old.
Mm-hmm. Because I had heard from Judge Larry Starkey that Neely wanted to make another run for it, based upon the fact that he remembered the court when he was on the court, where the West Virginia Supreme Court, it wasn't perfect, but it had respect and integrity.
Yes, and that's what he said. That's what he said, and that's what he said in the interview when he was interviewing me to run his campaign, and to me, I thought, he means it. He means it from his heart. There is absolutely no benefit, right, to this man other than truly caring about West Virginia and truly knowing that he can manage and he can add to that court from his experience. And we're just coming off of, the entire bench getting impeached. We're dealing with, this landslide of Republican values, quote unquote, and I was so impressed that he wanted to do it. And I'll go ahead and share here one of the things. We'll get to it a little bit. Like, if you look it up, if you do a little Google on him, in 1993, the Los Angeles Times headline was "The Dumbest, Laziest Judge Claims Title, West Virginia's Outrageous Pronouncement and Behaviors of Supreme Court Justice Wins Multitudes of Critics and Admirers." So in this Los Angeles 1993 article, it's talking about where Justice Neely himself says that he's America's laziest and dumbest judge, right? So these were some of the things I was reading about Justice Neely before, I went to meet him to talk about campaign strategy. And I thought, why in the world this man, he paid his secretary to watch or something. There was something there where, he used the courts to watch his son. There's things that it's like where he sued TWA because his baggage arrived late. I mean, he has a long list of interesting things, but what he said to me was very passionate about why he wanted to return to the bench. And, he truly believed that that what was happening in West Virginia would require a man of his age and means to step back into that. Unfortunately, and it is a sad, sad, sad day for West Virginia that he lost that election, and even more sad that we've lost his influence and upon so many thinkers in the law community. Because, when I hear, John, your story, and I hear, when he's directly impacting police departments, and we know we know that from 1989 to 2020, not much has changed. So.
Well, the interest, let me get this in to follow up on what you said, Crystal. The interest of the Supreme Court, I watched it for years as a prison law clerk. I got to be honest. And I stuck with that for a period of time after my release. The West Virginia Supreme Court interest changed because a lot of money from the companies, the corporations, behind Supreme Court justices. For instance, Brotherton got in, and Brotherton was, from what I understand, I don't know if you remember Justice Brotherton, right? For a period of time, he got in, and the court swayed, from what I understand, to the extreme right in the interest of the corporate enterprise, the people that, the corporations that could afford to put money behind the politicians. And that's what happened. Neely's style of adjudicating to the letter of the law, the Constitution, that kind of was beginning to fade out to the interests of the corporations. Okay, bottom line, I could see it plain as day. And I'm glad that I'm able to articulate it from my own perspective, the perspective of the grassroots people. Okay, we lost somebody that was about the letter of the law,
yes,
to the interest of the corporation. Okay, he's not in style no more. You know,
wow.
the noble litigator, the noble lawyer.
Mm.
You know,
and you're absolutely right about the corporate influence in the elections. I don't understand why these, I do not understand why judges they run on political parties. They're supposed to be bipartisan, but anyway, that's how it works. And I believe it's Don Blankenship, the coal baron, single-handedly started to influence with his money and his means, the Republican takeover in West Virginia, which we know it's a landslide. I mean, every county in West Virginia went for Trump, and the Democrats, I mean, excuse my French, but they just lost their ass. I just have to say it that way because it's unbelievable to me how bad they lost. But Don Blankenship started. Mm-hmm.
I got to clarify it there. You said every county. I don't think Mon County went Republican. I think there were some counties that did not go Republican. Okay, but
I'm pretty
for the
sure
most part, West Virginia,
every county went for Trump. Every county in West Virginia.
Every county. I got to go back and check the map. I did not know that, Crystal. I thought we at least had Mon County 1 or 2.
Mon County was the only county that actually elected some Democrats. So Danielle Walker and other folks were in there. But I'm Googling it right now.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, and not just that. It was a landslide. It was a landslide of a Republican win in West Virginia. I think it's so. But I say that because if you follow the history of the courts and you start to look at when Don Blankenship, the coal baron, was investing in campaigns, I think it was Brent, whatever his name is. I can see his face. Brent, what do you remember who I'm talking about, Brent?
Brent, I think I do remember that guy's name. Benjamin. Brent
yeah,
Benjamin.
Yeah. That was the first one when Don Blankenship started just pumping money. I mean, Brent Benjamin had billboards, he had radio, he had everything, had all the whole, thing, and he won. And so if you listen to Don Blankenship, he takes credit. He's a bit of a ego, but he takes credit for the West Virginia Republican takeover. And as we know,
that did it. That move right there you just talked about is not talked about a whole lot, but I experienced it because I was watching the court, and you just explained what I was trying to explain, that Blankenship put money into Brent Benjamin and got him on the court. I remember when Benjamin got on the court, too. And we were concerned about that the West Supreme Court was leaning too conservative after having been like Neely. I was one of them that was conservative. I stopped watching them. I was one of them that was concerned. I stopped watching the Supreme Court after Benjamin got on the bench. Okay, because it did lean conservative.
Yeah, and so now, when the noble litigator, the what how it's so shocking that we label to follow the Constitution, to interpret the Constitution, which was, I don't want to take the conversation there, but which was one of the reasons that I felt that it was necessary if someone was asking me to share my thoughts on Supreme Court nominee Justice Amy Coney Barrett, that I had a responsibility to share that I opposed her nomination because of, the way she interprets the law. See, the thing is with, justices, we're able to see how they actually rule on cases, and it's so disturbing how, how someone like Justice Neely, who follows the Constitution, is seen as noble. He's doing because it's so corrupt all the way around. That's just how I feel.
You know what? I want to commend you on your presentation on behalf of in opposition to Amy Barrett. I took some time to look at what you spoke about and your own personal experiences and so forth. And again, as a man, it's kind of hard for me to relate, but I try to relate and empathize. And I have my own views on. You spoke in reference to abortion and a woman's body, and whether or not a 16, 17-year-old can make a decision in terms of consent, which are complicated issues. Okay, so I know they deserve proper attention, and but when I looked at Amy Barrett's background to talk about her as a Supreme Court, as a United States Supreme Court justice, I looked at her background. I found out that she adopted 2 Haitian children, which I found was interesting. Did you see that about her, about Amy Barrett?
I don't find that to be any. I think that's I don't find that to be a benevolent characteristic of people. I just
hold on, look. Are you talking about Caucasians adopting black children? You don't find that to be benevolent?
No, I do not.
You find it to be superficial and deceptive?
I do not think that we open up the door as looking as how kind, how caring, and I say that with a lot of knowledge, having been raised by a white family, that that is a perception of compassion that I would greatly argue, and I actually found that I find it sometimes that piece of her that was upheld, she as thank you, John, for your kind words, but also, my opportunity, I had to speak on a specific issue, but, the specific issue is so much greater, when you look at the way that she rules on things and how she even got to the bench. It's that there's not a black woman that would have been able to float through the system as she did, and gosh darn it, I'm sitting here thinking, I wonder what Richard Neely would have thought about, what he would have said about her. I'm sure he would have had some interesting words, but these courts are powerful, and that's the bottom line. These courts are powerful. People have to pay attention to what's happening, regardless of who gets in the White House or not. She's going to sit on that bench for the rest of her life. And we know that step 1 in West Virginia, sort of Republican takeover, which, this is not my imagination. These are coming from, people that influenced the Republican Party with their dollars, such as, Don Blankenship and others. And if you listen to them and then you look at what happened, I mean, they started with the courts.
Right.
So,
right. There's a friend of mine. I told him that we were going to do this show tonight, and he asked me. He could be listening too, and if you're listening, go ahead on and press that one. And he asked me, "Was Neely Klan?" And that's what he asked me. And I responded, "I'm not." I told him, I said, "Look, I'm not exactly sure what Neely was, but we'll go over Neely's history or our experiences with Neely on the show this evening." But his question about whether or not Neely was Klan is a question that, being a black person here in West Virginia, an Afrocentric person, particularly being the fact that he's a judge, which is not necessarily supposed to be a political position. It's supposed to be a judicial position. But his question comes because we live in a state where most of us know that Byrd was a Klansman. So now we kind of look at it, and we kind of have to look at some of these other people that are in official positions to see whether or not they have Klan roots. You know what I mean? So when he asked me whether or not he was a Klan, go ahead. Excuse me, Crystal. Go ahead.
I think that, first of all, let me just say a little bit more about when I met Richard Neely, and to talk about his campaign. And one of his concerns in his ability to be able to win was that he's running as a Democrat, and that even though he's probably got an opinion on him that equals sort of the moxie of a Donald Trump, saying what he thinks when he wants to. I think no one would argue about that with Richard Neely. But one of his concerns. Yeah.
Not to interrupt you, I kind of get like an almost bratty kind of thing from him, because his father held a political position in the state as well, right? Governor, right?
Yeah, let me just give you some examples. So, this is Richard Neely. In 1986, he sued TWA for $38,000 because his baggage arrived late, right? In 1989, he told American Legion Youth Conference that police cannot prevent crime. He said it's time for citizens like you and me to go out and get our baseball bats and attack drug dealers. In 1990, he told American Legion Boys Society that it would be better off if women stayed home with their children. He said drinking, womanizing, and fighting in wars are all right until you have a family. In 1990, he said he wouldn't work within 500 yards of a person with AIDS. He also said, this is Neely, that the amount of damages assessed by corporations found to be negligent should be less if officials were really stupid, but damages should be more if they were really mean. These are just. He also said, told a group of young boys, tape a rubber to your American Express and don't leave home without it. So he was of that old school generation that said what he wanted to say, and thought for himself. But when he was thinking of his campaign, was very concerned, how is he going to win in Trump country? How is he going to win, the Trump voters over? And so this was really the heart of his 2020 campaign, to get back to the bench. So I put it on our slideshow there in our Blog Talk viewer. And so I suggested, and it might have cost me the job, but I said, listen, you're going to have to play into that. You're going to have to play into that Trumpism that people, that West Virginians seem to be so attracted to. And I suggested that he wear a hat for his campaign that said, "Make Justice Neely great again." Because in my thinking, let's just trick the people. We got to get you on the bench, right? If they think you for Trump,
right,
they're going to vote for you. If they think you're against Trump, they're not going to vote for you, and that's exactly what happened. So he refused. I didn't get the job. He said I'm just laughing. He just tickled me to pieces. One, he thought that I might get too much attention on his campaign, and two, he wasn't quite sure my strategy was going to work. And so what I respect about that is that he didn't want any part of Donald Trump. He didn't want to be aligned left, right, anywhere near. He did not want any part of that narrative. And I'm sure it cost him the election. Just so
now,
you
he was
know.
a Democrat. Was Neely a Democrat?
He ran as a Democrat, and he ran against Tim. He lost to Tim Armstead. Just so you know, John, the 2020 West Virginia voted 68% for Donald Trump, the entire state. That means Joe Biden 29% voted. 29% of West Virginia. There's 29% of people that means 29% of humans in the state that voted for Joe Biden. The rest of them voted 68.7% for Trump. You cannot that if this was a basketball game, we didn't put nothing on the board. So
the stars for the Democratic Party within the state of West Virginia. Who's the star? Joe Manchin is the star. So it's got to be something dealing with this.
I don't think Joe Manchin is. There's a difference. There's a West Virginia Democrat, and then there's a Democrat out in the world. West Virginia Democrats they need their own definition in Wikipedia. We need to define them as something else. So
I guess I can go along with that, but it's for real, from my perspective, it's Joe. I mean, let's just be clear. He's the leading Democrat. Shelley Moore Capito, by them being
the only Democrat. I mean, I don't know.
Shelley's a Republican, but she's a leading Republican though. She's a senior Republican. She's a Republican. Joe's the little senator, and he's a Democrat.
Yeah, he's a Democrat. He has a D. He's a Democrat, but I don't know. I have a lot of opinions about West Virginia Democrats, and
You want to hold those opinions to yourself. That's all right.
I'm just trying to figure out how to organize them, because one of the things is I think Richard Neely had such a great opportunity with just how vocal he is and how much he says what he thinks, even if it's what was so interesting is that some of the people that were sort of suggesting that he wasn't competent enough for the bench again, or, didn't have the right social whatever. We're bringing up things from his past that he said. And nothing Richard Neely said is even close to anything Donald Trump said. And Donald Trump won West Virginia 65%. So this just goes to show you that the voters in West Virginia, the idea of someone who opposed the Constitution, like Senator Byrd, who was part of the Klan, those days are gone. Those days are gone. So I do not think in any way that Richard Neely was attached to any of those groups at all. I think that's kind of that's a kind of it's kind of like an old school way of just trying to decide, is this person for us or against us, or how bad are they, but I think that, the interesting thing is that Neely valued, honored the Constitution, and even Byrd honored and valued the Constitution. And now we're in this new paradigm of quote unquote justice. And I don't know about you, but I don't feel, I think we're worse off in 2020 than we were at any other point in my lifetime. And that's wholeheartedly as a mother for my children. The trajectory of the state, to me, is terrifying.
Right. Well, I could agree on that as well, to the extent that people don't embrace the Constitution. As a black man, this is a conversation that I had with my father. He and this month would have been his birth month. But I said, Pop, man, it's rough out here, but they got to go by the Constitution. We got to stay in the Constitution and use that to our benefit. I'm talking to him based upon my experience in the prison law library and that I was able to get justice after having experienced life without mercy from a wrongful conviction. I still believe in justice at that time, okay? And this is back in 1996. I'm having this conversation with my father. My father looks back at me and tells me, Constitution, they violate that damn thing all the time. You can go out there if you want to and think you got some damn Constitution, right? I mean, that was my father took a cynical perspective that black people don't get no justice. Don't think you got no goddamn constitutional right. Me, I got in the books and found precedent where people had been violated and they got justice, but they had to work at it. It took effort. You had to compel justice. Okay? So my perspective was different from what my father's was. However, I paid attention to his perspective. Okay? He was, that we don't really get no justice. Okay? We have to make justice. Otherwise, we don't get it. Okay?
Yeah, we have to
compel
look
it with,
procure, what did you say? I mean, we have to, the legalese is meant to distract the average citizen. And the process is meant to distract that average citizen. I was hoping tonight that we would get a caller, a young woman who Neely represented as an attorney when she was a teenager. She sued her principal and her name's Caitlin, and she sued her principal for violating her rights. It was around sex education in the school. I don't remember the particulars of the case, but she was a young woman, and she was very courageous in standing up for her rights, knowing her constitutional rights as a young person. And Richard Neely stepped in, and it was kind of a big case. I'm going to have to. It went national.
Neely stepped in as a lawyer. Neely stepped in as a private lawyer.
Yes.
What year was this? What year was this?
I'm going to pull it up here, but let's see. She's my son's age, so she's about 25 now. This is when she was 16, so that long ago. And she said not only was he a competent and the best lawyer you could get, but the care and the time he took to teach her and to protect her and to value her rights as a young person, right? I don't know. I just, there's so many stories out there. What would you want to ask Richard Neely if you had the chance?
If I had a chance to ask Richard Neely a question, this is a question I would think. I would ask him a question to follow up on. I'm not only aware of Neely, I'm also aware of the work that Judge Arthur Reck put in, Ohio County judge. He ruled on two significant cases, one dealing with the unconstitutionality at the West End Penitentiary at Moundsville, where he condemned it. This is Judge Arthur Reck of Ohio County. And another case dealing with the Lincoln County school systems, where he held that the state had to effectuate a thorough and efficient school system, where he condemned the state's tax structure as being unconstitutional, meaning that they got matching funds. The counties got matching funds directed toward the school system as a source of revenue. The poorer counties, Arthur Reck claimed that they remained poor because of the state's unconstitutional system. So if I had a chance to talk to Neely, I would ask him about the state being able to comply with the Reck decision, which is highly controversial because the state has not complied. The state, even until today, there are some things that the state has fully not complied with even until today. One of them is the Reck decision. And the second thing that I would have to say that I want to ask Neely about would be the state moving away from the right to rehabilitation for those people that are incarcerated. Okay?
Say that
My understanding, the second thing would be the state moving away from the right for the right to rehabilitation for those people that are incarcerated. Under certain law, certain statute within the state, I learned as being a part of the prison law library, Cooper versus Gwynn, State versus Cooper, were various cases that mandated the right to rehabilitation for West Virginia prisoners. In the state of Virginia, rehabilitation superseded the federal standard. In the federal standard, if they had you incarcerated, they had to take care of you. But in the state of West Virginia, pursuant to the West Virginia Supreme Court's interpretation, West Virginia corrections had to provide rehabilitation. It first started with the women's prison at Alderson because they were the first ones to file. Cooper versus Gwynn came out of the prison at Alderson, where the women filed and said that they did not receive the same rehabilitation programs as the men. Okay? And that case set the standard. Well, other cases followed up behind that where the Supreme Court and the state moved away from rehabilitation and went toward a punishment focus. So now you have these monster regional jails developing in the 90s where they spent all these X and X amount of money and they developed these monsters throughout the state. Okay? So again, it would be about those two cases, direct decision and the state moving away from rehabilitation. Okay, I would want to hear what Neely has to say. He'd probably say the same thing that we just got finished saying about how the big corporations put money into their candidates and moved away from dealing with those are really grassroots issues. What I just identified, you know what I'm saying, the right to rehabilitation and direct decision, which dealt with a thorough and efficient public educational system. Those are common issues. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think Neely will be able to identify that, answering my own question.
Well, I just want to read this quote here from his book. It's called The Product Liability Mess. And he says, "Not only is my sleep enhanced when I give someone else's money away, but so is my job security, because in-state plaintiffs, their families, and their friends will always reelect me." So basically, he's admitting to tilting the law in favor of West Virginians who sue out-of-state corporations in product liability cases. And I believe that that no longer sits on the bench. Who sits on the bench represents, the corporations. They represent the out-of-state corporations. And he was so confident. This was, I don't know when this book was published, but he was so confident that the people would elect him because he was siding in their favor when they were wronged by corporations. And that's not the case anymore. I just want to just because I didn't want to give the wrong facts there, but when I was speaking about Caitlin Campbell, who Neely represented as an attorney, she sought an injunction against her school principal after he called her sort of a bad actor, a bad kid. Mind you, she's top of her class, and wouldn't allow her to speak at her high school graduation as the highest honor student there at George Washington. This is back in 2013 because she had spoke out about the principal and the administration there, and I believe they had like an abstinence speaker that was mandatory for the students to go listen to, and she was very vocal about that being an infringement upon her rights, and so there was retaliation by the principal in the schools, and Richard Neely stepped in. I'm reading this from the Huffington Post. Like I said, this was a national story, and I do believe Miss Caitlin has just passed her exams and will be a PhD, Dr. Caitlin Campbell, very soon. So, it's very interesting the way, Richard Neely stepped in and made sure that Caitlin got her justice also. And now she can carry that with her in life, and is doing quite well, like yourself. These judges make decisions, that really support the living of people. And I think that that's something that often gets skewed in the narrative when we talk about the justice system,
Right. Well, Crystal, in doing this show, we took the time to acknowledge Justice Neely and give some anecdotal information for another generation, that may not remember the kind of Supreme Court that we had here in this state. Because I returned to the Constitution, really, protecting the Constitution is really all that we could ask for, okay? I'm going to keep it real, you know what I'm saying? As I told you, I was talking about my father. He dismissed the Constitution, but I don't, okay? And we demand, we can make a legitimate demand that the Constitution be followed and protected, not only the federal United States Constitution, but the West Virginia Constitution, because there are instances, having read the West Virginia Supreme Court's decisions, there are instances in which the West Virginia Constitution has stronger principles in it, demands greater, meaning that we have a stronger right under the West Virginia Constitution in some on some issues than we do under the United States Constitution. So both of them belong to us. You know what I'm saying? And I say this in lieu of the fact that I use the term de facto West Virginia. You know what I'm saying? It's de jure de facto. It's both. That which is proper and that which is accepted as lawful but may not be lawful. So that's my perspective on it. You know what I'm saying? The good that we have from Judge Neely, we got to be able to snatch that, okay? Listen to this, Crystal. In my research on Judge Neely recently, there was one person that I did know that I was around, that Joe Dobbs. I wouldn't check Joe Dobbs' case out. He was from Fairmont, and I knew Joe, old school. Joe's dead now. But his case was reversed by the Supreme Court, West Virginia Supreme Court, too. And he was one of the first people that put me on to researching and investigating my own personal case, Joe Dobbs, okay? Neely, the Supreme Court reversed in Joe Dobbs' case, but Neely turned around and dissented in Joe Dobbs' case and said, no, his ass needs to stay in prison. He was busted. So, yeah, he was busted with the gun before and after so-and-so occurred. No. So don't think that Neely all the time was, Neely is Neely. I gave you cases where I was one of the people that had benefited from Neely on the bench, and Joe Dobbs got his case reversed, but Neely dissented in that case and said, no, I'm not going along with the majority view. I just wanted to put that out there.
And that's, yes, I'm so glad that that we did this show tonight and remembered, for the record, those that might come along, and we don't know what kind of West Virginia we're stepping into in the future. It's disturbing. Some of the people that were just elected to the bench, people that were arrested during their election, people that were, people that have restraining orders against women, and people that are really questionable characters.
Right. Crystal, there is something that I want to get on the record too while we're talking, right?
Yes.
Recently, here in the Northern District, Judge Irene Keeley, when I say recently, here within the last 2 years, Judge Irene Keeley had been the federal district judge up here for the longest. And if you lived in this area, you knew that she held judicial power for like the last 30 years. Well, Judge Irene Keeley recently retired from the bench, and I believe it was under the Trump administration, a willing lawyer by the name of, his name is Thomas Clee. he took her position.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been rather controversial. He's been rather controversial, and nobody has said too much about him. But I want to say it on the record that I took some time to go over his opinion, and he's highly conservative. I think he gave somebody over in Clarksburg, a black guy. I think the black guy was prosecuted over there for doing something. Somebody I knew from Fairmont, and he gave him a sentence equivalent to a life sentence on something. It was in the newspapers here in this area. So I talk about Judge Thomas Clee because I think it appears that he's a far-wing reactionary. Keeley was conservative already, okay? I don't know if you remember her, Judge Irene Keeley. She was to me, she was extreme conservative, okay? And we had hoped that once Keeley was out of there after her being in there for 30 years, we would get lucky and get somebody that was more balanced, okay? But it looks like we haven't. I'm just going to keep it real, okay? So we're looking for justice wherever we at, whether we be in the northern portion of the state or in the southern portion of the state, down there where the federal district court judge Irene Berger has got judicial authority, okay? Okay. I'm just putting that out there. Okay?
I mean, I don't think there's any balance in West Virginia, you know. I mean, I think that this is where we have to start the conversation. You know, that's why I think I sort of look at what, you know, it doesn't matter who the most powerful Democrat is because they don't have any power. We're in a super majority, and with the conservative courts that we have, you know, I'm gonna err on the side of your dad. And, you know, that's kind of how I'm feeling right now. You know, like I just, that's how I feel. And I think that's why it's important that we continue to have these conversations. We never know, you know, the exchange of knowledge and information is important. The history is important. And, you know, I think that and you have to know your rights. And I think that's what I keep hearing in your story all the time is the time you spent in the law library, that was learning your rights because, you know, how they told us when we were little, you know, they hide everything in a book in your computer. Yeah. You know, it is now in your computer and you can find that information. But, you know, nobody's going to go and hand you justice. You know, if it challenges anything or anybody else's comforts, or feeds into their own fears or stereotypes or whatever. I mean, it's just the world we live in. So you got to know your rights. And I'm so thankful that you did that, John, and that you know, that God lined it up so that you had Justice Neely in that courtroom, you know, on that particular day.
But I also want to thank. I have to qualify Neely again and say that there were people in my church. It's a spiritual thing when you fight for justice, and justice is one of those lofty principles, you know, one of them divine principles for real justice and freedom and equality. I had people in my church up here in Sharon, Pennsylvania, Cedar Avenue Church of God. The older people in that church, my grandparents, people along the way prayed for me, and I had to also do some work on me, okay? Bottom line, tell the truth. You know, you got to make justice, but you got to deserve justice too, okay? So, you know, if you find yourself in a situation where you're wrongfully convicted, it might have been something else you did and got away with. So, so what we do is we work on ourselves so we can do proper karma, man. You know what I mean?
That's right.
I had to resurrect and restore. I had to give up a certain way of life, meaning I had to recognize that I had been damaged and had a negative self-concept, okay? So I had to work on cleaning myself up. So I thank God for that, and I just want to make sure that the ancestors, because I am a student of Ma'at, which is the system of law and justice and order, and that played the part in it, in compelling that per curiam court, which Justice Richard Neely was the chief judge of to do justice. So, but not only, it wasn't just in my case. You remember, we came through years later and worked to get Jimmy Gardner out. Yeah. Justice Neely wasn't on that court That was Judge Goodwin's court, but it was the same type of energy where you have to make justice.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the precedent, is so important when we talk about the law. I think we're running out of time here, John. I've enjoyed this show, and I know it. I would just want to say that it was such a. I was so tickled and excited that I might get to run Justice, or hope to be Justice Neely's comeback campaign. And I didn't quite know how I felt when the what is it? What did he call himself? He called himself the dumbest and laziest judge in America. Didn't hire me. I wasn't sure how to take that, but he was gracious, and he was kind, and he was funny, and he really kind of showed me and told me that I had a creative mind and a spirit, and he saw that and he appreciated it. He just didn't think it would work for him. So I can his honor.
Crystal, was Neely a married man at the time of his death? Did he have a wife?
He had a wife and he had two sons, and his son Chance, we boxed together. There's a gym on the west side that pre-COVID I would box in, and I didn't know that workout boxing, and I didn't know that Richard Neely was Chase's dad until I went for my interview, and I'm walking through the hallway, and there's my boxing guy, and my boxing friend, and I'm like, I'm going to talk to your dad, and he was a family man, and his son worked there. One of his sons worked there in the law office. I believe he was married, a long time, and he will be missed. Just in listening to your story, that energy, sort of the end of an era, and what are we going into now is I don't even know how to speak to that.
Well, we've archived this story, and I'm going to talk more and more about him because I do still continue to come in contact as an investigator, researcher. I still come in contact with lawyers. Okay. And for me, I've got to say that Neely would have to be the standard. I'm talking about for judges, okay? But judges were formerly lawyers, okay? So, for the lawyer, I would say Justice Neely would have to be the standard.
Supreme Court Justice Amy Barrett, who's never tried a case. Go ahead.
No, I don't have anything else to say about her. There's not much I could say about her. I know that she was the Trump appointee. I'll say this though, about the election, and this is I guess an affiliate issue. I don't think it's over with yet. Okay, from what I understand in terms of the election, it's not over with until December 14th that each state has to be certified. And again, let me say also that I'm not a Trump supporter. I just believe that there could be some election irregularities. And I'm hearing it on the news, and I'm thinking that there could possibly be that. And if there is, I don't know what to think about that. Okay, yeah, I'm going to wait before making a decisive, statement in reference to that, okay? Because I don't want to be seen as a Trump supporter when I'm not. But if there's a problem with the so-called deep state, as Trump has been alleging all the time, you know what I'm saying? I had to go and do some research and find out exactly what the deep state meant. What does that mean? Okay, but I just want to put that out there to say that I don't think it's over with. Yeah, I think there is some evidence of election irregularities. Do you hear that? Do you hear that?
Yeah.
Too?
Yeah, I hear. Yeah, so I think it's 2020, and let's just see what the next surprise is around the corner. I just believe in staying present, like you said, keeping your karma clean, keeping your side of the street clean, minding your own business, trying to help your neighbor, and believing in yourself and your dreams. And I just want to remind, any folks that are going to listen to this later that they should check out on the Shabazz Report your interview with what's the justice, the judge, former judge, where you talk
Larry
about.
Stark.
Yeah, with Larry Stark.
Yeah, Larry.
That's a good interview to listen to. It's on the Shabazz Report. And, it's one day at a time.
I was going to tell you I enjoyed that interview with Larry. I called him Larry because he opened up and talked to me like he was down to earth. And he mentioned Justice Neely at that time and said exactly what you had said, that he was a very colorful fellow.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know what I mean? So, but yeah, it's there for the world to check out, and that's why we do what we do, and we encourage other people to get out and do grassroots media. There may be somebody in your county that the major West Virginia media may or may have overlooked. There may be somebody important that needs to be interviewed. So what you do is you go out, if you have the ability, go and interview that person. We need those grassroots reporters to give us a unique perspective from the grassroots people, the common people. So, we're just doing our job at being able to set up a model for that for other folks, okay, and document and archive our story here in West Virginia. Okay.
That's
so
right.
I continue to appreciate you for. Okay. Where's our friend Benny at? Where's our friend Benny at?
He was, he's going to get his trucking. Yeah. So I think, but hopefully we'll get him back on the show, and I'll let you know when my Richard Neely book comes in, and then we can plan a little show a little later on to talk about that. I'm kind of curious about how those things will sit in 2020. Some of those thoughts, but if you don't have anything else to say, we're going to let this beat ride, and then we'll hopefully be back next Sunday.
One more thing. Bristol, one more thing, okay?
Yeah.
I want to get this in. You sent me the report, the 2020. We got to do a show on this. So you take some time to think about it. You sent me the 2020 report dealing with racial equity within the state, and I'm still going over, okay? And I think it's necessary for us to maybe try and see if we can get Matthew Watts or someone that was involved with both reports and find out whether or not we went forward or went backward from looking at the 2010 report and then turning around and look at the 2020 report and see where we stand.
Okay.
Have you got a chance to go over it?
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
And yeah. It's not looking good. Nothing. So, but yes, I think you're absolutely right. Let's check in with some people, and I can do that. I'll reach out to Pastor Watts and the Center for Budget and Policy, and so hopefully we can cue that up for next Sunday. Okay.
All right. Hey, I figured I'd drop it on you, right? That's my sister.
All right, John. Have a good week.
All right, sis. You take care too. And peace and blessings.
You too.
All right.